Oil prices spiked to $100 a barrel on Friday amid anxiety over the Iran conflict and the disruption it has caused to supplies of crude oil and gas. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Friday announced a temporary lifting of sanctions on Russian oil, saying other countries can purchase oil currently stranded at sea. The US has granted a similar 30-day sanction waiver to India as part of efforts to cool down oil prices. Bessent called it a short-term measure, saying it will not provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government. The move comes after the International Energy Agency announced the release of record 400 million barrels from its emergency reserves on March 11th. With Iran saying it will continue its blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, it remains to be seen what effect the new measures will have in bringing oil prices down.
Currently, there is a blockage on what's called the Strait of Hormuz, where tankers and liquefied natural gas carriers are struggling to pass through this thin maritime choke point. So as a result of the Iran crisis and the blockage of this maritime strait, 20% of LNG, liquefied natural gas, and a huge proportion of the world's oil has not been able to flow onto global markets. This has meant that Russia has stepped in to supply that oil and gas to the global markets at increasing prices. So what our report shows is a 17% increase in Russia's oil export earnings in the first week of March compared to in February. And that means that they're earning from total fossil fuel exports, 510 million euros every day in the month of March from that oil and gas exports used to finance that war in Ukraine. So the main beneficiary of this Iran crisis, as we mentioned, is Russia from increasing their export revenues, as well actually as other fossil fuel exporting countries such as the US, who've been able to sell their gas and oil at increased prices in the current crisis. So this is counting live the amount of money that Russia is earning from their fossil fuel export revenues that they use to finance their full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The counter is currently over 1 trillion euros that they've earned in just over 4 years since their full-scale invasion. The main buyers of Russia's oil and gas exports have been depending on different commodities. So gas, the majority of Russia's gas is going to the EU, either through the remaining pipeline that goes through Turkey and enters the EU there, or on shipments of liquefied natural gas, mostly going to France, Belgium, Netherlands and Spain. So those are the biggest buyers of the gas that Russia has been exporting. In terms of oil, China, Turkey and India now make up 90% of all Russia's crude oil exports by destination. So those have been the main buyers. What is interesting is that India became a huge buyer and the biggest buyer in the world of seaborne Russian crude oil. But in light of the US sanctions in the end of 2025 on the two biggest Russian oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, India started to reduce the amount of Russian oil that they bought. However, as they used to buy a lot of oil from those Gulf countries that it now can't get access to in the current crisis, they have increased their imports of Russian oil. Lots of tankers that were sitting idle in the sea with no destination have started to show signs that they will be offloading in India. So that will be the biggest shift in terms of where Russia will increase their export revenues. It's likely going to be in India. The longer the crisis goes on and pushing up energy prices, this is going to benefit Russia. It's providing more money for them to pay for drones, weapons, recruitment of soldiers in Russia that are causing death and destruction in Ukraine. So sadly, the current situation of increased oil and gas prices is going to be very difficult for Ukraine. It's going to provide increased resources for Russia to finance that war in Ukraine. Additionally, it's sadly reducing the appetite of sanctions on the Russian fossil fuel sector. We've seen the US provide a waiver in their sanctions, which enables India and those other countries to buy more and more Russian fossil fuels used to finance that war in Ukraine. So